All right, so we are live on Facebook, everybody, for this special 5 o'clock live cast. I'll give everybody a minute to find us and get situated. I'm happy to be joined by somebody I know as the son of one of my friends, yet I'm so interested in what he has to say in his own right. So please come on, cozy in. Feel free to make some comments if you want here while we're going to on the Mindful Ohio Institute for Creative Mindfulness page. And while I'm giving people a minute to find us, I am just going to bounce this over to my personal page. So welcome everybody to the Institute for Creative Mindfulness. This is a very special day. It's the first day I've ever done 3 live streams in one day. But that's making me very happy because there's a lot of great voices and perspectives to hear. And today I am delighted to welcome ReShawn Kaufman, who is, I haven't seen him since he was about 10 years old. I know I sound like an old lady mom friend saying that. But ReShawn's mom, Janise, was on the show. She was our second guest in this Black Lives Matter series. Janise was one of my dear friends in graduate school down in Steubenville, Ohio. And I remember, meeting ReShawn and his brothers when they were younger, and gave them one of my hand-me-down violins because I always believe in passing down instruments when you're not using them anymore. So it's so nice to see you again as a young man, and just very excited to have you with us and to hear what you have to share.
And I do appreciate you having me on here. I actually still have that violin. I left it at my parents' house, and I won't let anyone touch it.
Aw,
It's my prized violin.
that's very precious. So, when you reached out to me, knowing that I was offering this platform up, I guess tell us what it is you feel you most want to share with us.
Well, there's been, and like I really hope that at least some of my friends get to jump in here and see this and realize there's a lot of times where, as a person, we don't speak up, and that silence has to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to make their voice heard, because by being silent, you're giving more room for what's going on to happen.
Yeah.
We like a lot of people when they jumped on the internet, you know, and this is gonna sound bad, but whenever it first came out, or they came out, and when people were rude, mean, it was a world of just ignore it, just don't say anything about it. But it's no longer acceptable.
Right.
It's given too much room for people to think that they can just say whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that this will at least help some people speak up, and maybe they'll come and speak out against everything going on as well.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about your experience being a Black man in Ohio. When were you, because your mother, when she was on here and was a guest, talked to us about having the conversation with you, as all Black mothers do, with their sons about the police. But I'm sure there were instances maybe even before that conversation happened. Like, when were you first aware of what Blackness was? Maybe in contrast to what whiteness is or was.
It's funny because I was actually thinking about that. I'm glad that was the first thing you brought up. Whenever I was in school, actually, I never understood how great I am as a person, how great like Black people are as people. Like, it was never something that was glorified. Like, I still to this day think about one of my favorite movies, The Prince of Egypt, the story of Moses and everything. And until recently, I never knew that pharaohs were actually Black people. I didn't even think that Egypt was in Africa until like not too long ago, because it just seemed like the way they portrayed it was just white people were the leaders, they were the rulers, and then all the slaves that were the Jews were Black, and that was it, and that's all I knew. And things like that, like just that movie alone, and learning and history and everything, you never hear about how great, like about great leaders and great heroes, except Martin Luther King, and he was shot. And you think, I probably shouldn't say anything. And from that point of view, I was always felt inferior. And so, and then hearing like you have to be careful around the cops and everything, it steered me towards wanting to be on their side and wanting to be an officer. So that really affected me for a couple of years until I started to actually open my eyes and realize things. And like even growing up, like I did some security work in the hospitals and everything. And there was some times where I had to support some of the officers and there was nothing I could say. But I even witnessed one of my own family members like just brutally beaten, and I couldn't do anything about it. Like it was really crazy. And that was a huge turning point for me. So I knew something had to be done.
So what was that something?
I knew that I had to at least try and speak out, try to change the narrative of things. So then I started to look and see what maybe some issues, and I mean, it is an internal issue as well. Like there's something that as a community we can do. We can do better than what we're doing. Like there's a lot of people that are just running around. They're just, it doesn't look right for the rest of us. And that's what the media focuses on. They take those people and they're like, well, that's the race. That's what they look like. Whereas someone like me, when I leave to go to a job interview, or if I'm just walking around, like I'm not going to walk around like a bum unless, it's my lazy day, which, everyone can do that. But usually, you wear something nice, you look presentable. And like that's really what most people are. They're just people.
Yeah. So do you remember when your mom had that conversation with you?
Absolutely. And I was pretty young, and it wasn't a conversation she really had to drill into me. It didn't get into one of those things until when I became security, because then I felt like I was one of them. That's when, she had talked about when I got my permit. That's when I got my permit. I was like, I'm fine. But even then, the only reason why I know I was fine in Steubenville was because I knew all the officers. I knew how they were. I knew how most of them reacted. I knew that me personally, I was safe. But what I didn't realize is that other people around me probably weren't as safe as I was. And that's another thing. You have to be self-aware of not only what you are, but what the people around you are. That's for everyone.
Yeah. So I want to explore what you said about changing the narrative. So as you see it, ReShawn, what is the narrative?
Right now, the narrative is like Black people and white people are just kind of opposites, but we're not. Me and you, we share the same love of music. Like we spoke of, you gave me my violin. You started me on a path. Like we are not all different. We're all human beings. There's no reason for someone to wake up and think, I hate that person because they're Black. And there's also this narrative of, I shouldn't have to teach you what racism is and how white privilege is. But the reality is they grew up like that. Like there's nothing that you can, like, it takes a long time for someone to relearn something. Like if you change computers right now, half of the world doesn't know what's going on. And that's something that we all have in common. Everyone uses a computer every day. So it's not that we don't need to teach these people. We need to get out there. We need to speak with people. We need to ask them, why do you feel this way? What can you really convince me that we are different? And if you can't, then maybe you should start rethinking what's going on. We need to help them and lead them to a new path.
Yeah. Do you ever get tired doing that? Or do you consider that as part of what you have to do on this earth?
I feel like by the time I get tired, someone else will take it on.
It's a very honest answer.
Yeah. It's very interesting to hear like different paths and different things. There was a period of time during the summer when there was a thing called the Unity Garden that I used to deal with. It was part of a company called the United Churches Association. And at first it was just a specific like type of church. But when I became president of it, because the owner moved away, I decided I wanted everyone. If you were atheist, if you were Catholic, if you were Muslim, whatever you were, I wanted you to come in. And I wanted us to share stories. I wanted us to understand each other. Because hatred comes not only from misunderstanding, but not wanting to understand. And if you sit down and you talk with someone, maybe you'll realize there's some similarities. We're not all that different.
Right.
Like one thing that I found out from just that moment alone when we were all talking, most religions all have a world-ending series of like a flood or something like that. So that's something we all have in common. So clearly, like we're all not that different.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought that up with global faith traditions, because something I'm really interested in my study is, well, let's look at the thing we have in common as people of faith. And usually it's something like the will of the divine, not mine, be done, and love one another. And so much of the rest of it is the details that people can get tripped up in and hate each other over.
Right. And that's like a lot of people focus on the negative. We can't focus on that.
Yeah.
The negative is the negative. We have to focus on the positive and try to change the negative.
So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on today is Kimberly just spoke before you about racial identity and being a biracial person and what she's learned in her worldview from that perspective. So something you said you were willing to share about is that your fiance is white. So what have you learned in your lived experience about being with someone who's white and interacting with her family and her world, and just any learning from that you're comfortable sharing with us?
Well, it's really funny because the original, well, her family is a little special. Like you have the side that, you know, I can be around and we're comfortable. And then you have the side where you're like, probably not going to go over there anytime soon. And it's like, it's a really interesting thing to deal with because you have to be careful with not only what they say, but what you say, because you don't want to egg anything on. But even in then, if they understand that we're not all that different, then maybe they'll start to change their ways. And that's where it starts at. It starts at home with your families. We're going to be married here in a couple months. We're going to be one family. So they're going to have to get used to dealing with Black people. We're going to have to use to dealing with them and their craziness. But in all reality, we're all the same type of crazy. So
crazy is a common denominator.
Yes. And when they start to realize that, then I have faith and hope that they'll all understand, and they'll understand that the things they say can be wrong or hurtful or things like that, and that they'll change their mind about how they feel.
So whether it's with your future family here or whether it's just out in society in general, have you been affected by this phenomenon we call tone policing? And one of my friends was on here speaking of it a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So a lot of the times I get away with it because all the cops know me. Because I've helped them with everything like that. But there have been some cases like when I first started driving. We were driving back from Robinson. It was me, my mom, a couple of friends were in the car. and I got pulled over. That was the first time I've ever been pulled over, and I didn't know what to do there. And so, you know, I pulled over the wrong side, of course. He's like, go to the other side. So I did that. But he said that he pulled me over for a cracked windshield. After, you know, running all my plates and everything, finding out I was new and I was talking, and, you know, I handled the situation well. But I knew in my heart that you couldn't even see that windshield. It was in front of me and he was behind me. You would have to have been in front of me to see the cracked windshield. So I knew he just pulled me over. And, you know, I was like, it's fine. It's what it is. But in all reality, it's not okay. Because it's a small thing for me for that one. But someone else, that could have been a huge thing. If it wasn't me, someone else could have been very angry, and then that could have ended someone's life right there. And it's not okay that could be a situation. That should never be an outcome for just being pulled over.
Right. So at the risk of sounding like a total therapist here, but I am, you know, how are you feeling, especially with what's happened since George Floyd's murder and the increased attention? Because this is not a new issue, obviously, but I think there's the country's paying attention now in a new way. So, I mean, how did it make you feel? How are you feeling? Anything on that you can share with us?
At first, it was like, oh, I guess it's another thing going on. But then I seen for the first time a country waking up. Like, I can say 2020 is that year that everyone is finally getting up. And it may be because everyone was just trapped at home and finally got to see the news all at once.
Right.
But there is protests everywhere. Like, companies are actually taking this seriously. And, like, they're putting out things like, we support you and this and that. And it may be so that their place doesn't get broken into or not. It's whatever. But it's the fact that it's being woken up, like they're waking up. And I'm proud of the country. Like, it really is. Me personally, I'm happy it's happening. But a lot of the issue that it's also happening is it's bringing out the people who don't understand what's going on, who only look at the media and think, well, why are they out there burning things down? And I had a moment, I want to say a couple weeks ago, where I was just on Facebook. I never go on Facebook because when these situations happen, because I know someone's going to do it, and someone did it. They posted about how all lives matter and everything, and they do, which is true, but you have to understand the situation. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that only Black Lives Matter. It means that we matter, and we have gone too long without being heard. Like, we've had so many peaceful protests. One of our leaders have been shot because of that. A lot of our leaders have been murdered, and it's not okay. Like, I even stated, if you want to start an all lives matter movement, by all means. The day you start an all lives matter protest, I guarantee you, everyone who participates in the Black Lives Matter protest will be there with you to support you. But till that day, when you get up and you start saying things out loud, we have to do what we have to do.
Right. So now that people maybe are 1 or 2 more degrees aware or awake, whatever you want to call it, you know, what is it you want folks to most understand? Because I heard you say this a couple times, like, people need to understand. And I feel your heart and your energy, but if you could, if you're willing to break it down a little bit further, now that you have the mic, what do you want us to understand?
People need to understand that it's not fair that as people of color, we have to tell our kids that they have to warn them about cops and about being out and being with certain people. I don't want to have to raise a child in the world where I have to tell them, you can't go to this place because there's too many people that might try to harm you. You can't go over there because you might not come back. That's not acceptable. We should not have to have that happen. We should not be walking around and people thinking we're suspicious because we're just alive and talking. It's not okay.
No.
It never has been okay. Like, we are people. We are not as threatening as anyone else. Like, I can tell you, when I worked security, my friend would walk in, like, the guy was my size. We were the same height. We would both walk in on a situation, and he would walk in first sometimes, and they'd be like, and then I'd walk in, and they'd be afraid of me.
Mm-hmm.
During a security sense, that's great. I love it. But in all reality, he was a mixed martial artist.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever that guy acted up, I would step back and let him take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm the least dangerous out of the two of us.
Yeah.
I'm just security. He's a mixed martial artist. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like, we have to understand that because of the color of someone's skin, they're not more threatening. They're
Right.
not. You have to get to know people to understand them.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yet also, as a white person who works as a therapist, I consistently deal with people who, and it's funny because I often, that's not funny, but I often go back and forth. Is it they can't understand or they won't understand? Or is it some combination of the two?
I feel as though it's not that they can't, but it's not also that they don't want to. It's that they've never been taught how to.
Speak more on that. This
Yeah,
is
like,
very wise here.
a lot of people, like I said, they've grown up just dealing with. They've grown up in a world where they're told they're better. They're told they're superior. They're told that black people are threatening, that they'll kill you, they'll burn you, they'll take advantage of you, and they don't know how to treat anything else. I've had a girlfriend before who, she was a little older, and she would live in that world, and we talked about it and we worked about it, and she wanted to understand. And I was open to answering those questions. You just have to be open to answering those questions, because that teaches people how to understand you and how to understand us as a people.
Yeah. Yeah, because I agree that people don't know what they haven't been exposed to. Yet, and I know I can talk about that intellectually all I want, yet there's also something that seems just royally messed up about the fact that, people don't understand the need to treat others with dignity.
Right.
And I firmly believe that's learned behavior. It's what gets passed down in certain climates in which people are raised. But I also have seen enough people who've been able to relearn,
Right.
to unlearn and relearn. And I consider myself one of those people, and I'm still relearning based on how I was raised and how I want to be in the world in contrast. So, and I've asked a lot of my guests this question, and I'm going to ask you, what do you see here as the path forward, either for the community in which you live or for this country as a whole? How do you think real systemic, meaningful change is going to happen?
We have to start at the root. The root of it all is the fact that our education system, our laws, everything was built at a time when black people did not matter. Our history books were built on history. One thing I will always remember someone saying, and I can't remember who it was at this point, but it was, history is always created by the victor. And that is what our history books are today.
Yeah.
Like, we have to tear apart what has been built off of the backs of black people and build it up as a community together. We have to build it as unity. Otherwise, nothing will ever change.
Mm-hmm. You just said something that gave me chills. And I know I've heard some variant of this somewhere in the discourse, but it was so deep, Sean. I wrote it down. Everything was built at a time when Black lives did not matter. Like the whole structure of what we're working with today, our education, our government, our laws, our courts, our legal system, and so much of what the movement, I believe, is about. Oof.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of people, like, for instance, the statues that are being torn down about the Confederacy.
Yeah, tell me your thoughts on that.
I mean, personally, I don't care whether they're torn down or not, because, you know, it is part of our history. I do feel as though it should be set in maybe a museum, because we should never forget our past. And I understand why some people are mad about it, but they should also understand that if you're mad about that because that's your history, then you need to accept that slavery was part of your history, that the laws were built, and that's part of your history.
Yeah.
And that needs to change as well. Like, I don't, like, it's just, it bewilders me how you can think of one thing but not the other.
Yeah.
Like,
and even as, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's like these laws always need change. Like, Black people were added into our laws. It was an amendment. So that tells you right there that they were not thought of until then.
Yeah. You said something, it just struck me so resonantly and so beautifully that there's, and I'm paraphrasing you here, but that there's an ugliness in your history too. That I think we all have to look at. And on a very personal level, as a therapist who helps people work through shame, that's so much of what healing from shame is about, is looking at the ugly parts of your personal story and being willing to embrace it instead of trying to push it away. And embracing it doesn't mean you have to like it, doesn't mean, but I think we will finally change when we are willing to look at the ugly parts and be honest about them, and instead of trying to deny it.
Absolutely. And like, it's time for our history to teach the ugly part and teach it right.
Yes.
And but also teach the beautiful parts. Like, I never knew some of the things that, like, Black people did, because I was only taught the ugly.
Right.
And I was never taught the ugly about, like, the rest of the world, because I was only taught the good. We have to understand the good and the bad. Otherwise, there is no balance. And that goes back to just basic yin and yang.
You got that. Oh, totally. You sure you're not going back to school for therapy at some point? you got the goods, my friend. So we have a couple questions for you, and if anybody has a question for ReShawn, please go ahead and put it in the chat. So this is from Kimberly, who was just with us, and she said, "Do you feel that people who came before you dropped the ball by not continuing to fight after Dr. King's death, or Malcolm X, or any of the leaders from the civil rights era?"
Honestly, I really can't blame them. Like, it was a time period where everything was rough. We didn't have the support. So in every rebellion, there's a time period where it's hide. It's be silent. And that was that time period. But we have what we need now. We have people who are willing to listen to us. We have people who care about us. Now it's time to speak out, to fight back. It's time. It really is. That's what I understand. That's what I mean, back to, you know, even when the internet started out, that moment of silence where you just ignore things, you let it go. That was that time period. But now it's time to stop ignoring things, to start speaking, to start standing up against things, to really show where you are.
Amen to that. So another question we got is from your mother. How was it growing up with a crazy therapist for a mom?
It's definitely enlightened me on some things.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd have the same mindset if it wasn't for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, to that point, if you're willing to talk, I mean, obviously I know and respect your mom a great deal. I don't know your dad as well, but, you know, what do you see the role of Black parents being here? in this era and going forward?
Well, one thing that as Black parents, they have to understand, and I'm understanding, and when I have kids, I will have to share down. You have to be supportive of your kids.
Yeah.
You have to be there. And there's a narrative with Black folks where you turn 18, you're out, and then you don't know what to do. You were put on this earth, you're thrown out when you're an adult, that's it. And that's a huge difference between Black families and white families that I've noticed. Like a lot of white families, they support them all the way until they're ready on their own. They mother bird them, which that's what's needed. That's really what's needed, because otherwise, if you're not there for your kids, then there's no telling where they're going to be. And that's your kid. You did that. One thing I always say is, I didn't whisper in your ear and make you have me. I didn't lay down. I was no part of it. I was only the outcome. You have to be there for me. And that's one thing I can say. I am glad that I have a supportive family. They are there for me. They've been there throughout the whole time. I can't say that about a lot of other families, and that too needs to change as a community.
Yeah. So anything else you want to share with us here before we wrap up our formal time together?
Yeah, just like I said, you have to support your family no matter what. If they're and that goes personally to me as a streamer. Like a lot of my family members, if you see that I post on there, just jump in. You don't even have to watch it. Just be there. Being there is what makes the difference. And like I've even written a paper on that in school at one point. Being there makes a difference for everyone. When you support someone and you're there for them, that's what matters. Like whenever I was doing like solo and ensembles for violin, it didn't matter whether they liked or what was going on with music, they were there. And that's what gave me the confidence to move on and continue and to be there. If you're there, then you support.
Yeah. Power of presence, ministry of presence. I just love that. So how can people find you? I know you're a pretty active streamer. What are the platforms you're on?
I'm on Twitch. It is twitch.tv/thataxis. And also I have a Facebook page. You can just talk to me on my regular page, my name, or you can follow my gaming channel, which is also thataxis. Basically, any platform that I have, it's thataxis. I try to make it really simple for everyone.
Love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and I hope it's not another 15 years until we talk again.
Oh, no, I'm sure it'll be soon. I'll gladly jump in whenever you need me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ReShawn.
No problem. Thank you.